The 1970s shattered every rule animation had ever known. While Disney struggled in creative limbo, rebels armed with X-rated cartoons, surreal nightmares, and rotoscoped revolutionaries kicked down the door to what animation could become. One film literally became the first animated movie to get an X rating and sparked a congressional protest. Ready to discover the animated underground that changed everything forever? Fritz the Cat, 1972. The cartoon that broke every taboo and became animation's first underground hit. Ralph Bakshi took Robert Crumb's countercultural comic strip and transformed it into something the industry had never seen. An X-rated animated feature that made more money than anyone thought possible. Fritz wasn't just a horny cat wandering through 1960s New York. He was animation's middle finger to Disney's squeaky clean empire. The controversy started before cameras even rolled. Crumb himself hated what Bakshi was doing with his creation, feeling the director was twisting his leftist politics into something more cynical. But Bakshi pushed forward with his $850,000 budget, creating scenes of explicit content, drug use, and social commentary that made censors lose their minds. The MPAA slapped it with an X rating immediately, and 30 American newspapers refused to even advertise it. Here's the kicker. The controversy made it massive. Fritz the Cat became the most successful independent animated film of all time, grossing over $90 million worldwide. Rolling Stone called it the most important breakthrough in animation since Yellow Submarine. It spawned countless imitators and proved that animation wasn't just for kids anymore. The film literally created the adult animation market that would eventually give us everything from South Park to Rick and Morty. Bakshi didn't just make a movie. He rewrote the rules of what animated features could be. Heavy Traffic, 1973. Bakshi struck again with his most personal and unhinged vision. Heavy Traffic wasn't just a follow-up to Fritz the Cat. It was animation as urban poetry, a hallucinogenic journey through the underbelly of 1970s New York that mixed live-action footage with twisted cartoon nightmares. Critics called it Bakshi's masterpiece, and for good reason. This was animation as raw autobiography. The story follows Michael Corleone, a struggling cartoonist trapped between his abusive Italian father and neurotic Jewish mother in the Bronx. Bakshi named the character after the Godfather protagonist as a deliberate insult because he hated the mafia and everything it represented. The film uses pinball as a metaphor for urban survival, bouncing between fantasy sequences where animated characters interact with real photographed backgrounds of decaying city streets. What made Heavy Traffic revolutionary was its technique. Bakshi pioneered a visual style that overlaid animation onto real film footage and still photographs, creating a gritty aesthetic that had never been seen before. The film received an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes and was ranked among Vincent Canby's 10 best films of 1973. Roger Greenspun of the New York Times called it as brilliant as anything in recent movies. With its $950,000 budget, Heavy Traffic proved that animated films could tackle serious themes like domestic violence, racism, and urban decay while still being commercially successful. It established the template for personal, adult-oriented animation that would influence filmmakers for decades. Fantastic Planet, 1973, the most mind-bending animated film ever created. René Laloux and Roland Topor's surreal masterpiece took viewers to the alien world of Egom, where giant blue humanoids called dregs keep tiny humans called oms as pets. But this wasn't just science fiction. It was a political allegory about Soviet oppression disguised as psychedelic art. The film's production story is as wild as its content. Originally planned as a French production, filming had to move to Czechoslovakia to cut costs. Then the 1968 Soviet invasion of Prague shut down production entirely. When work resumed, the Czech animators brought their own techniques to Topor's distinctive cross-hatched art style, creating cutout animation that looked like moving etchings. The result was 72 minutes of pure visual insanity that won the Special Jury Prize at Cannes. Fantastic Planet became the gold standard for trippy animation. Every frame looks like a Salvador Dali painting come to life, filled with phallic spacecraft, dancing crystals, and creatures that exist purely to disturb your dreams. The film's influence on animation cannot be overstated. It proved that the medium could be intellectually serious while remaining completely bonkers. Directors like Guillermo del Toro cite it as a major influence, and it's considered required viewing for anyone studying animation history. With Alain Goraguer's otherworldly jazz score, Fantastic Planet created a new category: animated films as hallucinogenic experiences. No other movie has ever looked or felt quite like it. Robin Hood, 1773. Disney's strangest experiment became their most recycled film and accidentally launched an entire subculture. This was the first Disney animated feature made completely without Walt Disney's involvement after his death in 1966. Director Wolfgang Reitherman faced massive budget cuts and studio chaos, leading to the most notorious use of recycled animation in Disney history. Scenes were traced directly from previous films. Maid Marian's dance moves came from Snow White, and Little John swinging around was lifted from Baloo in The Jungle Book. But here's what nobody expected. The film's animal character designs became groundbreaking in an entirely different way. Ken Anderson created anthropomorphic characters that moved like humans but retained animal characteristics, and this design philosophy accidentally became the foundation for furry fandom. By 1980, Robin Hood was being cited as a major inspiration for people creating animal costumes and artwork, essentially launching an entire subculture. The film was a massive financial success, earning $9.5 million in its initial release, making it the biggest Disney box office hit at the time. Critics were mixed, but audiences loved the folk music soundtrack by Roger Miller and the Southern-accented storytelling. Love even received an Oscar nomination. Despite being Disney's most budget-conscious production of the era, Robin Hood proved that strong character design could overcome technical limitations. It also marked the end of Disney's old guard era and the beginning of their search for a new creative identity. The film's lasting cultural impact went far beyond what anyone anticipated, influencing not just animation, but entire communities of fans who connected with its unique character designs. Watership Down, 1978. The children's film that traumatized an entire generation and redefined what animated violence could look like. Martin Rosen adapted Richard Adams's best-selling novel about rabbits fleeing their doomed warren, but he didn't make a cute bunny movie. He made an animated war epic that depicted the brutal realities of life in the wild with unflinching honesty. The film's production was as dramatic as its content. Originally set to be directed by three-time Oscar winner John Hubley, the project fell apart when producer Martin Rosen fired Hubley and took over directing duties himself. Working with a budget of just $2.4 million and a team of mostly British animators, Rosen created 78 minutes of hand-drawn animation that looked nothing like Disney's polished style. Watership Down became infamous for its graphic depictions of rabbit violence, ecological destruction, and death. The British Board of Film Classification received complaints about the film's U rating for over 4 decades, finally upgrading it to PG in 2022. But the controversy didn't hurt its success. The film became the 6th most popular movie of 1979 in the UK and launched a cultural phenomenon. Art Garfunkel's theme song, Bright Eyes, became a massive hit across Europe. The film proved that animated features could tackle serious environmental and political themes while still being commercially successful. Its influence can be seen in everything from Guillermo del Toro's work to modern animated series that don't shy away from mature themes. It demonstrated that animation could be both artistic and emotionally devastating. The Lord of the Rings, 1978. Ralph Bakshi's rotoscoped epic that split Tolkien fans down the middle and revolutionized animation techniques. This was the first serious attempt to adapt Tolkien's massive novel for the screen, decades before Peter Jackson's trilogy. Bakshi used an experimental combination of traditional animation, rotoscoping, and live-action footage to create a visual style that had never been attempted on this scale. The rotoscoping technique involved filming live actors in full costume and makeup, then tracing over the footage frame by frame to create animated sequences. This allowed Bakshi to capture complex battle scenes with hundreds of characters that would have been impossible to animate traditionally. The result was simultaneously groundbreaking and controversial. Some scenes looked incredibly realistic and fluid, while others appeared strange and disconnected when mixed with traditional animation. Produced for $4 million, the film earned over $30 million worldwide and proved that fantasy epics could work in animation. But United Artists made a fatal marketing decision. They refused to include Part 1 in the title, leaving audiences expecting a complete story instead of half of one. The film ends abruptly at the Battle of Helm's Deep, and Bakshi never got to make his planned sequel. Despite this, the film's influence was massive. Peter Jackson has admitted that Bakshi's version introduced him to Tolkien and served as inspiration for his own trilogy. The rotoscoping techniques pioneered here would later be used in films like A Scanner Darkly. Bakshi proved that animation could handle epic storytelling and serious fantasy themes, paving the way for everything from anime to modern CGI epics. Allegro Non Troppo, 1976. Italy's savage parody of Disney's Fantasia that somehow became better than the original. Bruno Bozzetto created this anarchic masterpiece as a direct response to Walt Disney's classical music anthology. But instead of family-friendly whimsy, he delivered a cynical, surreal, and hilariously dark commentary on humanity, war, and civilization. The film combines 6 classical music pieces with live-action segments featuring a bumbling presenter, an elderly female orchestra, and an animator being held against his will. But it's the animated segments that became legendary. Bozzetto's interpretation of Ravel's Bolero features a Coca-Cola bottle that lands on a desolate planet and evolves into all forms of life, only to destroy itself through pollution and war. His take on Vivaldi's Four Seasons shows an aging satyr desperately trying to recapture his youth and virility, failing at every attempt. What made Allegro Non Troppo revolutionary was its willingness to use animation for biting social commentary. This wasn't just a parody, it was a manifesto against American cultural imperialism, consumer capitalism, and the sanitization of art. Disney veterans actually praised the film, with Ward Kimball recommending the Bolero segment to his animation students. The Walt Disney Family Museum even held an exhibition celebrating Bozzetto's work. The film won the Critics' Referendum Prize at the Yellow Kid Awards and influenced countless animators who wanted to create more mature, politically conscious animated films. Bozzetto proved that animation could be both entertaining and intellectually provocative, establishing a tradition of animated satire that continues today. Wizards, 1977. Ralph Bakshi's post-apocalyptic fantasy that smuggled Nazi imagery and environmental themes into a sci-fi adventure. Set 3,000 years after a nuclear holocaust, Wizards tells the story of 2 wizard brothers, the good Avatar and the evil Black Wolf, who discovers ancient Nazi propaganda films and uses them to inspire his army of mutants. This was Bakshi's first attempt at creating a more family-friendly film, but his definition of family-friendly included graphic violence, Nazi imagery, and political commentary about the dangers of fascism. The film's production was typical Bakshi chaos. Working with a budget of just $1.2 million, he combined traditional animation with rotoscoping, stock footage from Alexander Nevsky, and actual Nazi propaganda films. The result was a visual patchwork that shouldn't have worked but somehow created a unique aesthetic. The climax features the hero literally shooting Hitler footage to defeat the villain, one of the most bizarre endings in animation history. Wizards became a cult classic that influenced an entire generation of fantasy artists and filmmakers. It was one of the first animated films to seriously address the appeal of fascism and the power of propaganda, themes that were ahead of their time in 1977. The film's environmental message about technology versus nature resonated with audiences during the emerging environmental movement. George Lucas cited it as an influence on Star Wars, and its combination of fantasy and science fiction elements helped establish the template for modern genre storytelling. Despite its low budget and controversial imagery, Wizards proved that animated films could tackle serious political themes while still delivering entertainment. Yellow Submarine, 1968. The psychedelic masterpiece that redefined what animation could look like and launched the era of experimental animated features. While technically from 1968, its influence dominated the entire 1970s animation scene. George Dunning's adaptation of the Beatles' music created a visual language that had never been seen before. Flat, graphic animation inspired by pop art, psychedelic posters, and comic books. The film's production was a creative free-for-all. Heinz Edelman's art direction combined op art, art nouveau, and pure imagination to create the underwater world of Pepperland. The animators were encouraged to experiment wildly, resulting in sequences where musical notes become literal objects, where characters morph and transform constantly, and where entire sequences exist purely as visual poetry. The Blue Meanies attack with green apples, love conquers hate through song, and nothing makes logical sense but everything feels emotionally perfect. Yellow Submarine's influence on 1970s animation cannot be overstated. It proved that animated films could be artistic statements rather than just entertainment. Every experimental animated film of the decade, from Fantastic Planet to Allegro Non Troppo, owes a debt to its visual innovations. The film showed that animation could be abstract, that it could prioritize style over narrative coherence, and that it could appeal to adult audiences without relying on shock value. Music video directors still reference its techniques today, and its influence can be seen in everything from Peter Chung's Aeon Flux to modern motion graphics. Yellow Submarine didn't just change animation, it proved that the medium could be high art. The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, 1977. Disney's return to classic storytelling techniques and the last film to use the traditional storybook approach that had defined their golden age. Compiled from 3 previous featurettes, this collection marked the end of an era for Disney animation while simultaneously becoming one of their most beloved and enduring films. The film was notable for being Wolfgang Reitherman's final project as a director and for featuring the last performances of several classic Disney voice actors. Sterling Holloway's final turn as Winnie the Pooh became the definitive version of the character, and the film's gentle, episodic structure felt like a return to Disney's roots after the experimentation of the early 1970s. What made The Many Adventures revolutionary was its restraint. In an era when animated films were pushing boundaries and shocking audiences, Disney proved that there was still magic in simple, well-told stories. The film's watercolor backgrounds and soft character animation established a house style that would influence Disney productions for decades. The Sherman Brothers songs, including The Wonderful Thing About Tiggers, became classics that are still sung today. The film grossed over $20 million and reminded audiences why Disney had become synonymous with quality family entertainment. It proved that innovation didn't always mean revolution, that sometimes the most radical thing an animation studio could do was remember what made them special in the first place. Its success helped Disney regain confidence during a difficult transitional period. Charlotte's Web, 1973. Hanna-Barbera's ambitious leap from television to theatrical features that brought E.B. White's beloved story to life with unprecedented emotional depth for the studio. This marked a significant departure from their typical comedy-focused productions, tackling themes of death, friendship, and sacrifice with remarkable maturity. The film featured an all-star voice cast including Debbie Reynolds as Charlotte, Paul Lynde as Templeton the Rat, and Henry Gibson as Wilbur the Pig. The Sherman Brothers, fresh from their Disney successes, provided songs that perfectly captured the story's blend of humor and heart. Mother Earth and Father Time and Charlotte's Web became memorable additions to the animated musical canon. What made Charlotte's Web groundbreaking was its willingness to deal honestly with death in a children's film. Charlotte's sacrifice to save Wilbur was handled with genuine emotional weight, proving that animated features could be both entertaining and meaningful. The film's success, earning $9 million against a modest budget, demonstrated that television animation studios could compete with theatrical features. It influenced other TV studios to attempt feature films and showed that animation could faithfully adapt literary works without losing their essence. The film's blend of humor and genuine emotion became a template for successful family entertainment that didn't talk down to children. Coonskin, 1975. Bakshi's most controversial and misunderstood satire, a brutal takedown of both racist stereotypes and the black exploitation genre that almost destroyed his career. Originally titled Harlem Nights, the film was a radical reimagining of the Uncle Remus stories set in contemporary Harlem, using animation to expose and criticize racism rather than perpetuate it. The film's production was surrounded by controversy from day one. The Congress of Racial Equality protested the premiere, forcing Paramount Pictures to drop distribution immediately. Protesters set off smoke bombs during screenings, and Martin Scorsese captured footage of people running from theaters for his own film projects. The controversy was based largely on misunderstanding. Critics saw racist imagery without recognizing Bakshi's satirical intent. Coonskin disappeared from theaters almost immediately, but has since been recognized as one of Bakshi's most sophisticated works. The film used offensive stereotypes specifically to critique them, employing the same techniques that underground comics artists had been using for years. Bakshi himself always insisted this was his best film, and modern critics have begun to appreciate its complex approach to race relations and media representation. The film influenced later satirists who wanted to address racism through uncomfortable but necessary confrontation. Its suppression became a cautionary tale about how controversial art can be misunderstood and censored, even when its intentions are progressive. The Rescuers, 1977. Disney's triumphant return to form and the beginning of their creative renaissance. After years of recycled animation and budget constraints, The Rescuers proved that Disney could still create original, emotionally engaging stories that captured the magic of their classic era while appealing to modern audiences. The film marked several important firsts for Disney. It was their first film to use a female protagonist as the lead, their first to deal seriously with child endangerment, and their first to successfully blend comedy with genuine suspense. The voice casting of Eva Gabor and Bob Newhart created a sophisticated dynamic that appealed to both children and adults. What made The Rescuers revolutionary was its technical achievements. The film featured some of the most detailed and atmospheric animation Disney had produced in years, particularly in the Louisiana Bayou sequences. The character animation returned to the high standards of Disney's golden age, with Milt Kahle's designs for Medusa becoming an instant classic. The film's success, earning over $48 million worldwide, proved that Disney could compete with the changing animation landscape. It launched a new era of Disney confidence that would lead directly to The Little Mermaid and the Disney Renaissance. The film's influence can be seen in every successful Disney film that followed, establishing the template for modern Disney storytelling that balances humor, heart, and adventure. Raggedy Ann and Andy, A Musical Adventure, 1977. Richard Williams's ambitious attempt to push traditional animation to its absolute limits, featuring some of the most complex and fluid character animation ever created. Williams, who would later work on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, brought his perfectionist approach to this adaptation of the classic dolls, creating sequences that showcased what hand-drawn animation could achieve. The film's production was notoriously difficult, with Williams demanding countless retakes and revisions to achieve his vision. The result was animation of extraordinary quality, particularly in sequences like the Greedy's candy-making factory and the Looney Knight's castle. The character animation was so fluid and detailed that it influenced an entire generation of animators who studied Williams's techniques. While the film was not a commercial success, earning only $1.8 million against its substantial budget, its artistic influence was enormous. Williams's work on Raggedy Ann and Andy established him as one of animation's greatest technicians, leading to his involvement in projects like The Thief and The Cobbler and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The film's sequences are still studied in animation schools today as examples of the medium's potential. Williams proved that traditional animation could achieve levels of sophistication and artistry that rivaled any other art form. His techniques influenced animators from Disney to Studio Ghibli, establishing principles of character animation that remain relevant today. Pete's Dragon, 1977. Disney's groundbreaking blend of live action and animation that pioneered techniques later used in Who Framed Roger Rabbit and modern CGI films. While not entirely animated, Pete's Dragon's revolutionary integration of hand-drawn animation with live-action footage created new possibilities for the medium. The film's technical achievements were staggering for 1977. Elliot the Dragon was animated completely separately from the live-action footage, then composited using techniques that required frame-by-frame precision. The animators had to account for lighting, shadows, and perspective to make Elliot appear to truly inhabit the live-action world. Don Bluth, who worked on the Dragon's animation, used these techniques to inform his later independent productions. What made Pete's Dragon influential was its proof that animation and live action could coexist seamlessly. The film's success, earning $39 million worldwide, demonstrated that audiences would accept this hybrid approach. The techniques developed for Elliot's animation directly influenced the later development of CGI characters interacting with live actors. The film's blend of traditional Disney storytelling with technical innovation pointed toward the future of the medium. While purists argued about whether it qualified as true animation, Pete's Dragon expanded the definition of what animated films could be, setting the stage for the digital revolution that would transform the industry in the following decades. Which of these groundbreaking films shocked you the most? Are we living in a better animation world because these rebels kicked down the doors, or did they go too far in their quest to prove animation wasn't just for kids? Drop your thoughts below, and let's debate whether modern animation has the guts to be this revolutionary again.